This lecture is going to focus on America's entry into World War II. We had really been focusing on getting out of the Depression. That was the focus of the White House and the president. A lot of people, because we're in a depression, did not want to spend any money getting involved in a war in Europe or in Asia. And they didn't want to, they knew the cost of war from World War I, so they didn't want to get involved in actually the human cost of it either. The president knew that nothing but a direct attack on America would get public opinion high enough that he could enter the war. He was trying to help the Allies throughout, which we'll talk about right now. We were a country that was neutral. We were not taking sides during the war. But were we really neutral? Well, we had our favorites for sure. The United States Congress passed a series of laws called the Neutrality Acts, and that banned the United States from providing weapons to our good friends, the French and English, or to the enemies of World War I, Germany, and now Italy. We could not loan money to these countries, and we did have a policy called cash and carry. This was an amendment to these Neutrality Acts, which allowed the United States to trade with nations, but the only thing we could trade with those nations that were fighting during World War II were non-military goods, goods that could not be used to fight a war. FDR was opposed to these. He did not like them. He thought that if the rest of the world knew that one of the big boys, the United States, was not going to get involved in the war, then it would only encourage the aggression of the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese. Next slide. So, when Germany invaded Poland, the public wanted to help England defend Poland, but of course there was no time to defend Poland. We sat by. And when France fell, the public began to get very nervous about what might happen in Europe, because remember, during World War I, France had never fallen. It didn't take very long into World War II before the entire nation fell. It was after this point the Neutrality Acts began to be repealed by Congress, and we began to send weapons and ships to England to help defend England. France had fallen. The Battle of Britain was on. What would we do to help Britain? We did have committees. This is Charles Lindbergh speaking before the America First Committee. The America First Committee was, forget about Europe. We need to focus here in America. A lot of people considered people in the American First Committee to be German or Nazi sympathizers. Next slide. And the story that President Roosevelt told, and he used to have these fireside chats where he'd get on the radio and just tell America what he thought was going on. He said, and this is in pertain to Europe, or England in particular, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't sell him the hose. You lend him a hose, you take it back when the fire's out. England, our good friend, is under attack. We are not going to sell him things to defend themselves. We are going to give them what they need, and we'll work out the details later. And this led to what is today known as the Lend-Lease policy. The Lend-Lease policy was pretty simple. To defend England, it was our duty. It was vital in the American interest to not have England become occupied by the Germans. So we would send tanks. We would send supplies and ammunition. We would send planes, and we would send ships to help. We would lend them anything they needed to help defend themselves against Germany. We would work out the details later. We sent $49 billion worth of materials and weapons to 40 different countries during the war. And England actually paid us back every cent that we loaned them. So it worked. Oops. And we'll stop this and do Pearl Harbor and be done.